once you learn how to separate feelings, and like understand it and articulate it really kind of changes how you're able to heal. You know, if you're in an environment where you feel like you can be yourself completely and not have to like change how you talk about things, like it's great. But sometimes when you go out into the world, like you have to change,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
approach and the language you use for it to like really sink in or for people to take you seriously. And
Yeah.
that code switching just kind of gets exhausting sometimes. If you're different, you're different. But you don't have to deal with what people are putting on you. You have to be able to get to a place where you know yourself, and you don't always know yourself when you're young. And so I really have tried to find ways to dedicate my life now to helping others. If you're not sure what it is, it's okay to feel. Like I always think about of like grieving is not linear. It changes. It's never going to be the same for every person in, the same order, same time frame.
Hi, and welcome to another episode and another season of the Woman Witness podcast of Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Here on this platform, we bring to you dynamic stories of faith, resilience, and transformation to empower you, to strengthen you, and to set you up on your journey in your walk with God. Whether it's with family and friends or community, this is the spot where we do it all. Each episode, we dive into the lives of incredible women who have faced challenges and embraced their calling and found the courage to rise stronger together. Here at The Well, we believe that every story is a testimony to God's grace, and together we can grow, uplift, and support one another. So I invite you to join us each and every Monday as we release a new episode of a woman who shares her story of victories and lean into the power that we use to shape our lives and the world around us. Today, we're going to be talking to an incredible woman, a woman of faith, a woman of resilience, a woman who faced some of the toughest times and challenges and emerged stronger and wiser and more resilient. In today's episode, we're exploring the profound impact loss, a universal experience that we've all had to be a part of in some shape, form, or another in our lives. And it usually leaves us feeling broken and unsure of the path ahead. But loss can also be a catalyst for growth and a turning point that ignites our journey of faith, healing, and transformation. I'm excited to introduce you my guest today, Tia Battle, who's going to take us along her journey of healing and restoration and the impact that a loss can have on one's self. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you my guest today, Tia Battle. Hey, Tia, welcome to The Well.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Tia. Tia, when you reached out to us and mentioned that you wanted to talk to us about the impact of loss and your interesting story of resiliency and faith and growth, I was like, I am all for it. And there's so much space for it. So many women's lives that I know that can be impacted by your story. So thank you for being a witness and coming back and sharing with us.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. It's been an interesting year in terms of diving into it more and kind of embracing it. And so this came at the right time.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Can I just give you the floor, give you an opportunity to share your personal journey with loss? And well, let's start there.
So I am Kansas City born and raised, and there I lived with my grandparents and my mother. And from a very early age, I was very acutely aware of the difference in our family. So after I was born, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and had the bottom from knee down amputated. And so she learned to walk when I was learning to walk as a kid. So it kind of, that timing came in
Yeah.
place. And so I grew up around someone with disabilities. I understood it
Mm-hmm.
interacting with her. And then she later went on to have cancer again, where she had one of her lungs removed. And then eventually it spread to her brain. And she passed away when I was 10 years old. So a couple of weeks before my birthday. And it was a really big like shift because you know the stages of grief, but you don't necessarily go through it the same as a child. And so it was a lot of guilt and then just confusion and a lot of numbness. There are some blank periods where you just don't think about it. And then as you get older and you forget things, it kind of circles back to guilt of like, how do you hold on to that memory? And so that's coincidentally enough, it's actually this week, which was great timing for this episode because it's
Mhm.
23 years since she passed this week.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow. And what a way to, as you said, with timing, kind of bring it all full circle to then to, talk about it and talk
Yeah.
about how it kind of catapulted you into this new path that you're down, right? Of
Yeah.
coming back and being a witness and helping others. Can I, if you don't mind, losing a parent, I can only imagine is like an incredible challenge within itself. And with you being so young on top of that, can you talk to us about how you navigated that loss in the initial stages and what that looked like?
It was, life didn't seem very different at first.
Yeah.
So it kind of immediately after the funeral, after, life's kind of picked up again,
Hmm.
it kind of just flowed into like, okay, I think I want to go back to dance. I go back to school. It just kind of, everything continued, but I still had a lot of guilt. For a while, I felt like I was to blame for it, just because of timing. And it was completely a phase of like, I felt guilty, but I didn't talk about it. A lot of my family members, we're still learning how to cope with grief. And so they didn't really talk about it. We went on to planning my birthday party. And so I just remember being like 2 weeks later, like having a birthday party, like
Yeah.
bowling and friends and family. And it was loving and just like, it's like, okay, there's just a person missing. This is odd. Like, but you kind of just go through the motions. And I think eventually a couple of years in, so around 12, it kind of all came to a head of like holding things in, to the point where I didn't want to be alive anymore. And that's kind of my first like real encounter with a relationship with God versus just going to church. And
Mhm.
I went to school one day, a friend asked me like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like just random, like as we're getting stuff
Yeah.
out of our lockers, and some voice just told me, "Say the truth."
Tell her.
Yeah, and I was just like, "I'm not okay. Like I think I need to talk to the counselor. Will you go with me?" And she sat with me
Mhm.
and we went to the counselor. We talked. I told her that like I had attempted a couple of times and failed, and this is what I was feeling, and self-harm. And she called my aunt, who I call mom now, um, and she came and talked to me and immediately was just like, okay, therapy, we'll do
Yeah.
it. And so that's kind of how it got me started with healing.
Yeah. And that's at such a young age. Now you said that at that time you were like 15, you said?
About 12, yeah, it hit kind
Well,
of
I'm
quick. I was
sorry.
still
Yeah,
young.
12.
Yeah,
Yeah, still so young. And I commend you, one, for being able to articulate yourself and be able to say, yeah, no, I'm not okay. I have a almost 12-year-old. I don't know, like these
yeah,
you just sharing that kind of encouraged me to make sure that even, being able to have those healthy conversations, or making sure that, those kids, even at 12, are able to tell you how they feel, because they are feeling
yeah,
something just because
yeah,
of their, and you tell us, sometimes I feel like we just think kids are so resilient, which they are, but they still have feelings.
yeah. And sometimes you don't know what that feeling is. Like, I definitely didn't know what it was at the time. Like, when you're
Yeah.
12, you don't know, like, especially, back in like 2000s, like they're talking about like,
Yeah.
hey, here's like depression and anxiety
Yeah.
and PTSD. Like, you don't know those things when you when you're a kid, but I just knew
No.
something was not right, and that I just wasn't happy,
Okay.
or I felt stuck. And so,
Yeah.
like, even just being able to say like, nope, not okay, was a miracle, because I wouldn't have even thought. You, as kids, you just adjust to the new norm and you just
Yeah.
keep going.
I'm so glad you have that voice inside of you. That angel's like, no, you're not. In what ways you said that's when you knew that there was something bigger, that God was on your side? And now, I didn't ask you if you grew up in church. How did you know?
Was raised Catholic. So Catholic church, went there, did the whole thing in terms of like confirmation and, you know, just really going through it. So I grew up in the church. My mother was a very devout Christian. She wanted us to go, so we went all the time. I was surrounded in church by people who looked like me and like did some of the same things in terms of like being in the entertainment industry and like really just kind of, it was such a loving environment. She taught Sunday school or like Bible study on Wednesday nights for the teens, and it just became like such a loving place. And I think I always like knew about God. I was, you know, believed in God, but I think at that point I didn't really like have a relationship or a connection until then.
I hear you saying you have that firm foundation. And sometimes we don't even think about when I hate to say it, but nowadays with everything going, so, you have this to do, you have that to do, you have this birthday party, that birthday party.
Mhm.
But you have to, if you can, I'm not judging nobody, let's be clear. But if you can, you got to get these babies in there to get them that firm foundation.
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself, I'm not talking to so, what advice would you? So, knowing that you had that firm foundation, how do you feel that faith influenced your healing process after such a grave loss?
I think it kept me grounded. I think about
Mm.
like where I am now, and every single difficult like impasse that I have faced since then, I can
Yeah.
see myself like subconsciously connecting with God in a way where I look back and I'm like, oh, like even in subtle
That's
ways of like
yeah.
as in college, like when I got to college and I was still kind of like struggling, and I was diagnosed with some illnesses and like hit a rough time. And so I was steeping back into a depression, didn't feel like I had any friends, like outside of like my roommate. And
Yeah.
when I naturally enrolled in more classes that were, because I went to a Christian liberal college, and so enrolled in classes
Ooh.
that forced me to be around those who were studying to be ministers. And so I was in
Wow.
classes with them talking about how we can use like what we know
Yeah.
and our knowledge of God to help others and support others and other organizations. And like for me, that
Yeah.
was like turning back to what I learned,
Yeah.
which is be with the Lord.
Yeah. I like that. So that's what you went to school and you studied for?
No, I
To
went to
go
school for theater, which is so odd.
Oh, okay. I
I
was like, wait a minute. That is so cool.
Yeah, but it's definitely played a part. Yeah, at a very like around 3, I started
Mm.
training to be a professional ballet dancer, and so that was my life.
Oh,
So between ballet and then eventually theater and dance and acting, a few PBS shows and things, just kind of like smaller stuff, but
wow.
that became my entire world through college up
Yeah,
until I got sick and I couldn't dance anymore, and I had to kind of like take a step back, and that forced me to explore like how else can I bring joy to others and support
yeah.
others while still being connected to art.
Okay, well, talk to us about that because after dealing with the loss of your mom, now you had to, in one way or another, grieve something that you really love, something that's your identity, what you wanted to do. Talk to us about how that played a role in your overall healing process?
I think overall, it I think it comes in waves where I I know there's an impact. I think,
Yeah.
you know, person who's been to therapy knows like, hey, I am, fearful of like relationships or even down
Mm,
to starting families, like the idea of having a child and,
mm,
either leaving them at a young age because they don't
mm,
have a
mhm,
parent now, or especially because my mom was a single mom, or
mm,
being able to pass an illness because our
mhm.
family, I struggle with health issues and, thank God I don't have cancer, but
Yeah.
it's something that runs rampant in our family. So the idea of passing that to a child scares me. And so, like,
Mm,
even down to how I approach relationships, it's
mhm,
easier for me to just back away and not really let people in a deeper level. It's very surface. And I
mhm,
think after a while, when you get older and you're like, oh, I don't have that many friends. I'm kind of isolated.
mhm. Yeah.
I kind of, don't have many people to really like talk to. You kind of
Mhm.
realize like, oh, there's something bigger, and you
Yeah.
start to see the threads connected to that. And I think that that loss has really kind of impacted just my view of even working hard. I feel like there's this invisible standard of striving to like be like her and to achieve things like her.
Mhm.
She was a lawyer, she went to law school. And so even just like I'm working on my PhD and I'm like
Thinking about
going
her.
through it, it's stressful, but I'm like, I've noticed now I even compare myself of like, I'm not achieving anything. Like I don't feel like I'm hitting the mark,
Really? Yeah.
but I'm like, I don't even know what that mark is. Because
Mm.
at this age, after the trauma, so much of it is kind of blanked and
Yeah.
I don't remember. So I know what she looks like because of pictures. I remember quick moments because someone has told me what happened in that picture. But like
Yeah.
I don't remember her. I just I just remember her face. And so it's kind of like I don't remember that many things and I'm striving
Mhm.
towards something that I don't even know. And
Oh, that's deep.
yeah, it's challenging, but it's also like it's exciting to try to be something like her and people say, "Hey, she was like this." And it makes you feel good, but then also it's like, "Oh, she would not be happy with how I'm handling things on this matter." But I don't
Yes.
even know. So it's an odd process.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're talking about this, Tia, because I think that there are a lot of people who are in that grief who may have gone through it or going through it currently, and they just can't see the way out. But even with you being vulnerable and coming and talking about your journey and dealing with the impact of grief, because that's what it's all about, because like you said, it comes in stages and it's
Yeah.
layered and it affects so many different areas of your life. And I love what you said when you talk about and you highlighted the fact that, sometimes in our communities, we don't do a really good job of dealing with grief, right? And we don't
Mhm.
really put a name or a label on it. And, you said 23 years ago, we just started talking about mental health, depression, anxiety like 2, 3, 4 years ago, I think, right? Since the
Yeah.
pandemic. So you've started, your journey of living your truth and talking about this healing process so other people can, maybe find a way or maybe share theirs or be able to find community. But can you share with us, based on the impact of your loss, how does that play into the mental illness that needs to be really spoken about, if you will?
I think the impact of that, it really kind of shapes how you look at things. And sometimes you don't really know that you are grieving or depressive state or just having anxiety because some things it's just like, oh, I get stressed at work and my chest gets a little tight, and
Mm,
that's a form of anxiety. Like that should not be the case where you're feeling difficulty in terms of like
mm,
breathing. You shouldn't be like dreading getting up in the morning. And those
mm,
things, like, we don't necessarily always put names to it, and we especially don't teach children those names and like feelings. I say it all the time, but I'm so blessed to have a family that did not question the idea of therapy
Yeah.
for me at such a young age, because I still stayed in the church, we still prayed, but they also said, we don't know how to handle this. Let someone who does, who's trained. And so
Yeah.
I learned skills of even just like being able to associate a feeling with a color of like, I'm kind of feeling red, and like knowing that like if I'm like in a mood or if I'm like sad, it would be like blue. And when I just didn't want to talk, it would be like black. And so I was able to like draw pictures and like kind of articulate how I was feeling until I could be old enough to put words to it. But it's so important to teach like
Mhm.
children and even adults at this point,
Yeah,
like
come on.
the
Because we
words
all
to
have that little
associate.
child inside of us that never got
Yes.
healed. I mean, not we
Yeah.
all, but a lot of us.
A lot of us, and we sometimes we
Yeah.
don't even know that that's where the issue is. Some people talk about like daddy issues or mom issues, and
Yeah.
like, but that's still all related to your inner child. Like if you go through a
Yeah.
breakup and there you feel like abandoned or rejected, like there's probably something rooted there too of like, why does someone
Mm.
who it's not good to you, like, hurt you?
Yeah.
Like, why does that matter like so much? Why do the opinions of others on socials matter? It just,
Mm.
there's so many things of like, you have to, once you learn how to separate feelings, it and like understand it and articulate it, it really kind of changes how you're able to heal. Because even being able to stand up for yourself or to tell someone, I don't know what I'm feeling at this moment, but I need to
Yeah.
talk to you about it,
Right.
or let's take a
Yeah.
step back, it
Yeah.
it impacts how you communicate with relationships, friendships. It just, that little bit of training I got because of that trauma shifted how
Yeah.
I was able to advocate for myself.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think about it now being at my tender age of I'm not saying this a lot, but you think about if you go back and you look, you're like, man, I wish I would have been able to handle that situation differently.
Mhm.
But I probably wasn't at that time in control of my emotions. I wasn't in
Mhm.
control of my emotions. And of course, we've all been there, right? You send that email and before you know it, you didn't press send. You're like, dang.
Yeah.
When you had time to calm down, maybe reread it a couple times, you like, oh, I shouldn't have said it like that. I meant everything I
Mhm.
said, but there was a way to say it, right?
Yeah.
And like, I couldn't agree with you more. Man, how many more people would have not lost their jobs or,
Mhm.
maybe stayed in that relationship just a tad bit longer because maybe you were at a turning point that could have helped. But because we don't know how to articulate ourselves sometimes, or we let our emotions run us, you know.
Yeah.
You're hitting on something right here, Tia. It's a little personal. Um But it's true though. You're right. I think some adults may need to. Talk to me about this neurodivergence. Am I saying
Yeah.
that? Am I saying
Yeah,
that?
neurodivergent. So
Talk
it's really
talk to
just
me about that.
when your brain and how you process things work a little bit different. And so I, quite young, along with being diagnosed with PTSD, when I
Mhm.
first started going to therapy, post traumatic stress disorder, I was also diagnosed with ADHD, and
Mhm.
later on in my adulthood diagnosed with OCD. And so even just like in higher stress moments when I am not in control of my emotions as much, or if I'm like really worked up, I notice like repetitive in terms of like, okay, did I actually scoop the right amount for dog food? Did I feed her
Mhm.
today? Like I walked by it, but did I actually do it? Or you have to learn
Interesting.
little tricks of like put in baskets. I have a basket in the kitchen. So then if I can't find my phone or my like the TV remote, like
Mhm.
it's in one of those places, because it's like if it's out of sight, out of mind. And so just even learning how to navigate that, I think that even things like that affect how your brain work. And so you
Mhm.
learn, okay, it may be difficult for me to process this. And so how do I communicate, hey, I'm not feeling well, or this is happening, especially because like my brain moves so quickly. Sometimes I'll just jump from thought to thought to thought. And it's like, you kind of have to fill people in sometimes. You got to take them
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
And so it's been a challenge learning how to like keep your
Yes.
brain focused on a path.
Hold on, talk to us about that. I'm sorry because I'm kind of like that too sometimes. I mean, I think we all are. Tell
Yeah.
us what at at what point, T, and I'm being very serious about this. Do we say, hold on, maybe perhaps I might need to seek, some professional help? I can't lie. I mean, I used to do it a lot, and I probably still do it. If I'm completely honest with you, I will have so many things that I just want to get all out. But at what point should I say, you know what, Leah, maybe you need to sit down and talk to someone, or you know what, tell us what point. When do we get help?
Well, oddly enough, like we always see that kind of like running joke or meme of like, all the kids that were in like the different class are separated like because they're too hyper or needed
Uh
to
huh.
like they were gifted programs. A lot of those kids are on the spectrum. A lot of them were just neurodivergent and just didn't know how to communicate that. And so we don't always see those signs of like, oh man, this kid will never sit down. They are so hyper. Or,
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
even like delaying in how they speak or difficulty kind of articulating themselves, which sometimes like especially
Yeah.
if there's like mornings where I haven't had my taken meds yet, I will be like struggling to get a sentence out when it's like
Yeah.
something super easy or you can't remember
Yeah.
things and there's brain fog. So I think really it's if you notice a pattern where like you
Mm.
can't sit still, like, or you're extremely withdrawn or isolated from people, but then like if you feel safe around someone, like I have a best friend and I just kind of like anytime I talk to her, I just like dump. Just like, hey, here's what I learned. Or I like go like down a rabbit hole of like a topic that interests me, or even
Yeah.
repetitive of like I eat the same foods. Like I know that like I get really picky. It's easier for me. Like, here's what I have, this is what I like. Same thing repetitive. And sometimes it's like you don't even know those things, especially for women of
Interesting.
color and women in general. It is so much more difficult to diagnose a lot of those things like autism and OCD and ADHD, especially because some of the symptoms are very much the same, but also because as women
Mm.
and young girls, we wanted to fit in, we wanted to be like others. And so a lot of the time, how we acted, we learned how to shift and to kind of conform and adapt to like, oh, this is kind of the cool
Mhm.
thing. And so that it's kind of hard to really unmask and be like I know who I am, but like are these personality traits of like my surroundings or these are really mine? And it
Ah,
becomes everything gets layered and hidden. So then it's harder for us to be diagnosed because it could just be like, hey, she's a moody teenager. She may not be moody. She may just, be like, oh, like I'm frustrated about something and
interesting.
you can't tell.
Oh, that's interesting. Hold on. Wait, you said it's higher. It's sometimes it's harder to diagnose for women, but in particular, Black women.
Yeah.
That is
We're
interesting. Tell
we're
me.
so used to holding like we're so used to holding the like weight of the world on our shoulders and like having to
Mm,
be perfect in how we appear and how be more
mm,
mindful of like how we approach things, and that's like a form of masking where like I don't want to be on a Zoom call with all these people today. Like I have to smile and be like, hey, how's it going? And it's like, that's not how you're feeling, but like you can't
yeah,
appear in your true
yeah.
form. And so even things like that, we're used to just adapting and code switching to where
Sure.
it's harder
Mm,
for us to like really notice like, oh, this isn't normal,
mm. Ooh, I heard that word before. Sorry, you just mentioned it, and I was talking to a girl on one of my podcasts about that. What did you call it? You called it code switching.
Yeah, code switching. Like it's kind of, that like I will use like either slang or a lot of
Yeah.
times like think I try my best to keep a damper on it, but I curse like a sailor sometimes. I just especially find myself like I'm
Yeah.
walking around and it just gets so frustrated and But
Yeah.
then, when you're in a business call, I try to be a
Yeah.
little more mindful in terms of articulating myself,
Yeah.
especially because I know I can go on a run and just like words will kind of blend together, or, how
Right.
I present myself is so different than sometimes how I actually
Yeah.
am. And so, if you're in an environment where you feel like you can be yourself completely and not have to like change how you talk about things, like it's
Mhm.
great. But sometimes when you go out into the world, like you have to change
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
approach and the language you use for it to like really sink in or for people to take you seriously. And
Yeah.
that code switching just kind of it gets exhausting sometimes.
It sure does. Hold on, I want to tell you this. It's interesting you said that because I found that a lot of things that we do are habitual, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if we are listen, if we are screaming at our kids to get ready, trust me, if somebody catches you, that's not anything that's new, right? Or if
Mhm.
you're cussing, that's not nothing that's new. If you're
Yeah.
driving down the street and you're speeding, and all of a sudden you get caught, you can't be like, oh, this is a one-off thing. You probably speed all the time. So this is
Yeah.
something that I have been working on in my whole journey, if you will, of I said to myself, whatever you're going to be, Leah, let's just be it. Okay. Let's
Yeah.
just do it and do it full force. If there's certain things that I used to do, certain behaviors that I used to do that I try not to do anymore, I still slip. But at the
Mhm.
same time, it becomes easier because I'm doing it on a day to day basis. I always say like this, it's like praying. Sometimes
Yeah.
people start praying and you be like, ooh, that's her first time. And that's okay if it is. But but you can't be over there preaching at everybody because you're just getting on your journey. But you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
is this really your first time doing it? But we only get better by trying something new. So I love that. I'm sorry. Every time I hear
Yeah.
somebody say it, I use that opportunity to bring light to it. Who you want to be, because you're right. I'm tired. Like I
Mhm.
think about all these episodes. I've done over 100 episodes, and one thing I'll tell you, you can watch my first one to my last one. I'm still me. I
Mhm.
haven't changed. So and I just love
Yeah.
that. But I have also seen other people in their episode. You like, ooh, that's different. Ooh, that's different. So I get what you're saying. It's exhausting. Talk to me about resiliency and faith. You've been
Yeah.
through so much, Tia. How did you turn your life experiences into this path or into this route that you're taking now and going back and helping others? How the heck did you find the resiliency to go and do that?
I mean, I have to contribute it to the loss. It surprisingly enough, being in therapy since you're 12 years old, you learn a lot, and also being someone who like hyper focuses on topics sometimes, and like you go on a deep dive. Can't tell you how many like books about psychology and like the way the mind works. Just like you just seek for knowledge, and so I just learned all these different words and like techniques. And so I was always the friend if someone had a
Mm,
question or needed advice, or even just to be like, to say how they're feeling and be heard. Like,
mm,
I was usually the person that people went to. Sometimes still am in terms of like, me and my mom, my aunt, we have talks
yeah,
so much all the time. And if she'll go through something at work, I'll talk to her about it, and we'll like exchange ideas of like, how do we approach this? And how are you feeling? And,
yeah.
it kind of just turned into a natural thing. And I was in a situation where in college, I was trying to pursue acting. And before I got sick, I had a director within the program say, "We don't see you acting." And
Mm,
so they just kind of pushed me into tech. And so I ended up learning lighting design and set construction. And granted, I absolutely love it,
oh,
but it
okay. I'm
definitely
hearing.
it breaks your confidence a bit. And I mean, think about like ballet dancers. I grew up, with Russian instructors. And so, like, telling you about, like, hey, especially our bodies are a little bit curvier than other women. And so,
Yeah,
being there and like not feeling like I was good enough, those little things
yeah,
kind of just pile up.
yeah.
And, that's normal for any, young person. But when you get to that point, and I look back at it now and I was like, I never want other people to take that as the final word. Like, I wasn't strong enough or aware that I could push back and say, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that other people won't.
Right.
And so I just stopped. I stopped trying. I stopped pursuing it. Like, even like down to grad school, switched to like marketing and business versus continuing with design. And I just didn't have faith in myself. And I realized there's got to be other people. Like, even thinking about, I'm a huge women's sports fan, and all the issues with like Angel Reese and being attacked lately, and like thinking about like even Caitlin Clark, like going into these like professional worlds straight from college and all the spotlight on you. Like, there's no prep for that. There's not always the
No.
most support, especially for people who get it. Like, agents can be there and they support you, family can support
Yeah.
you, but like being in there and being like criticized or judged in such a critical way in the industry, it's difficult. And so
It's
getting
like, why do
there,
why do
yeah.
they have a different set of standards that they're supposed to live by? I mean, if somebody, if most of us had a camera in our face 24/7, baby, I know you're not squeaky clean. Okay, I'm gonna calm
Mhm.
down. Okay, I'll calm down. Sorry.
No, I feel the same way. It's so frustrating. It's like you get if people have any little bit of access to your life, one, whatever social is on social media is truth, which is ridiculous. Like, the entire internet's a lie. It is. Like, not everything is real. And then
Right.
like also you can't believe that like just because you only see the good things doesn't mean that they're not also struggling. But at the root of it, they
Yeah.
are human, and also they are young. And I just want other people who are going into situations where it's challenging, where you're going to be like over criticized and rejected. Tons of opinions are going to always be thrown at you, and you have to be able to stand up. You have to be able to stand up for yourself, for what's right and wrong in your
Right.
eyes, and like be able to be yourself. I'm very lucky that I am now at an age where I feel comfortable with who I am. I am who I
Mhm.
am. I understand, like, I have a huge connection to the Lord. I, pray every day, but I also know with ADHD, my and routines, like, they fall apart. I can do something so well for 3-4 weeks and it falls apart, and I have to give myself
Mhm.
grace to know that like my brain just works a little
Yes.
different. Like, all that, like, so much, but like I'm not going to always remember Bible verses, but that doesn't mean that my connections even less. And so you just have to be able to
Yeah.
give yourself grace. And so being able to be that type of support, to be like, hey, if you're different, you're different, but you don't have to deal with what people are putting on you. You have to be able to get to a place where you know yourself, and you don't always know yourself when you're young. And so I really have tried to find ways to dedicate my life now to helping others and helping them feel seen and heard, and have just a walking hand with them so they know that, hey, like, I don't have to listen to all of this, or I can talk to someone about it.
I love the WNBA, so I love the fact that that's your passion. And yeah, I think we need more people in there telling their stories, these
Hmm.
women, because if we're all in this together, then we can help reshape that narrative, because it's not all what everybody's making it out to be. There's
Yeah.
much more. There's much more. So I love that you're doing that. How has your perspective on life and faith evolved as a result of your experiences with mental health and loss?
Grace is a big one
Yeah.
in terms of really kind of giving myself the space to feel. I know a lot of the times in church of like, don't question God. And it's not that, if you have questions of why, it doesn't mean you're questioning him. It's you're seeking answers. And that's who you're supposed to go to when you seek answers. And
Yeah.
I've always been that person of like, he doesn't make mistakes. I fully believe that. And so
Yeah.
if I'm asking him a question, if I'm asking for help, if I'm asking for clarity, it's not me questioning him. It is truly me asking, teach me, help me.
Mm.
And so I got to a point where
Mm.
I learned, even in life, like, and faith, that like if I ask my parent, like, hey, like, why do I have to do it this way? Like, it's not me questioning your authority, it's me wondering and wanting to know. And I think that understanding of like that applies to God as well. It's helped
Yes.
carry me through because it gives me the space to be like, I don't know everything. And if I'm trying something my way, I'm like, oh, this may not be the right thing to do. And so
Mm.
it's just kind of, it's been a good give and take of like, we're here to learn, we're here to
Yeah.
help others. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if I can ask God and get that answer, I can share that with others of like, this is why, this is how it works.
Yeah.
And so that's really how it's kind of impacted my frame of mind and thinking moving forward.
I love it. And you're absolutely right. I think we should, and I think because of the expectation and, that we, can, we sometimes, and most of the time, especially when we're young, we begin to walk our faith, we compare God to our parents a lot, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to bother you with this, but God wants us to. He said,
Hmm.
bring all of our questions, anything that we need, ask in his name, lay
Yeah.
down all your burdens. Okay, what message do you hope to share? We're going to talk about just in segueing this to a close. We want to talk about what message do you hope to share with others who might be struggling with similar issues?
There's nothing wrong with you, in that it's okay to feel. Having feelings, or whether it's extremely deep or shallow, if you're not sure what it is, it's okay to feel. And like I always think about of like, grieving is not linear. It
Mm.
changes. It's never going to be the same for every person in,
Mm.
the same order, same time frame. I mean,
Yeah,
mine hit 2 years later as a child, and even more now I feel it as an adult, as you're trying to grow and be able to connect to the person you lost. And so I think just be able to give yourself the room to feel, and
yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing you can learn.
Giving yourself room to feel. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because sometimes if we take on the weight of the world and even if we say we're okay, are we really giving ourselves space to heal? I get it. Okay. What are some goals that you have for yourself moving forward? Where do you see Tia Battle and you see your ministry going within the next I don't like doing 5 years. I just feel like you can accomplish so much with God and faith in one. Okay. But I'll
Yes.
give you 2 years. Where
Um,
do you see yourself in 2 years?
well, I'm hoping within 1 year, hopefully 6 months, I can be done with
Yes.
my PhD. I'm in the writing phase, so I would love to be done, and be able to use kind of the things that I have learned, and hopefully be fully ingrained back into the sports or entertainment world and working with others. I ultimate goal would be like kind of how the NBA and WNBA have the mind path, like their mental health programs, like even just
Yeah.
developing something for rookies, like a buddy system to help them, and really give them extra support that first year on the mental
Yeah.
side. I want to be able to create better spaces for
Yeah.
women and everyone, but specifically women, to be able to feel and to feel heard.
Yeah. Oh, what a fantastic idea. Oh,
Yeah.
Tia, that's great. Yeah, girl. You're gonna do that. I can see so
Yeah.
much room and space for it too. Yeah, you'll do that for sure.
Yeah.
Get
One way
that,
or
finish
another,
that
I'm going to help.
PhD. Yes, get that PhD, write that book and start that path. I know. I could definitely see that. Tia, before I let you go, I just want you to tell everybody where to find you and follow you.
I have a business, Jump Quickly, at letstaketheleap.org.
Mhm.
And that is kind of been, I've finally made it public, where the helping of athletes and industry professionals, entertainers, been helping them just as a small business. And now I'm taking it making it well known. So there's a website there to find out more, and as well as on Instagram, Jump Quickly. And I'm always interested in being able to connect with others and help. And so come look me up. Be good.
Right. Well, amazing. And I would take all of Tia's information. I'll put it in the description below. If you're listening to this and you know that you were touched by it, or you know a friend or a sister who needs this encouragement, who needs to hear that they're not alone, that there are places, there are people that are out there that can help them, that there's community that they can lean into. We ask that you share it with them. Don't even explain it to them. Just hit the share button and share it with them. We ask that you follow Tia on all social media, like, subscribe, reach out to her if you have any questions. If I'm able to help, I'll help, but I'll probably give you to Tia. But I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Woman Witness podcast. But before I let Tia go, I need her to give us a soundbite, a recap of the impact of loss and moving forward in their own healing journey. Tia, can you just leave our listeners with something to take with them throughout the week?
The impact of loss is ever changing, and you have to be able to take that idea of what you don't have and start applying it to what you do have. So get away from thinking of what you've lost and the little things you gain from that person. Try to apply that moving forward, and it'll help guide you.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you so much for coming and pouring at this well. I appreciate you so much for being vulnerable and just sharing with us and filling us up for this week. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Woman Witness podcast of Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Perhaps you were chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time.